You used to flick pennies into an orange-tiled fountain inside a building that cost $175 million to build. And today, that same spot is an Amazon warehouse. The name's Frank, and from where I'm sitting, watching your world from this side of the screen, you had something nobody will ever have again. Malls that weren't just stores, they were cities. Your city. You hung out there. You had your first date there. You ate terrible pizza there and thought it was gourmet. In the 1980s, there were roughly 2,500 malls across the United States. Today, about 700. That's not a decline, that's a wipeout. I've pulled apart the histories of over a dozen of these places. Who built them, what made them tick, what killed them, and what's sitting on top of their bones right now. And some of these stories, you're not going to believe how they ended. Before you can talk about these malls, you need to know about one guy, because without him, a lot of them wouldn't exist. Edward J. DeBartolo Sr. from Youngstown, Ohio. He served in the Army Corps of Engineers during World War II, and after the war, he saw something nobody else was paying attention to. People were leaving the cities and moving to the suburbs. So what did DeBartolo do? He started building shopping centers right where those people landed. Not in the city, in the flat, empty spaces between the new neighborhoods. At one point, he owned nearly 1/10 of all the malls in the United States. Let that sit for a second. 1 out of every 10 malls in the whole country. Same guy. Oh, and just because building malls wasn't enough, in the late 1970s, he also bought the Pittsburgh Penguins and the San Francisco 49ers. The man collected shopping malls and sports teams like baseball cards. But DeBartolo's biggest baby? That was Randall Park Mall, North Randall, Ohio, August 11th, 1976. This shopping center was built on the site of the former Randall Park racetrack. So picture this. One day, horses are running circles on dirt, and the next, 2.2 million square feet of retail space, marble columns, and the smell of Cinnabon. The Randall Park Mall opened with 4 department stores and over 100 specialty stores. In the months that followed, more opened. The interior was unique. Tiled floors, marble columns, sculptured ceilings, and decorative ramps. It housed over 200 stores, a 3-screen movie theater, and 9,000 parking spaces. It was anchored by 5 major department stores: Sears, Horns, Higbee's, May Company, and JCPenney. First-year sales hit $140 million in 1976 money. Adjust that for today, and your calculator starts sweating. If you grew up in the Cleveland area, this place was your living room on weekends. You dragged your mom to the pet store. You begged for quarters for the arcade. The holidays? That mall at Christmas was the whole world to you. By 1995, the 120-store mall still employed 5,000 people. 5,000? That's not a mall. That's a small town with a Sears attached. But then, something changed. The mall's decline began in December 1994, when Edward J. DeBartolo died. The man who built it, who fought for it through zoning wars and court battles for over a decade, gone. And after that, 2 years later, DeBartolo Realty merged with competitor Simon Property Group. 2 of the mall's anchors, JCPenney and Dillard's, left as part of company-wide downsizing triggered by big box competition. Now, you know what happens when a mall loses its anchor stores, right? It's like pulling the legs off a table. Everything on top comes crashing down. In 2004, the mall was purchased by Witchard Real Estate for just $6 million. $6 million. For a place that cost $175 million to build. That's like buying a Corvette at a yard sale price. After over a decade of decline, it closed on March 12, 2009. All power to the mall was turned off in May 2009. And what happened to the spot where you used to flip pennies into a fountain? Where your mom used to take you to pick out school shoes every September? Amazon built a new distribution center on the site in 2018, an 855,000 square foot warehouse, bringing 2,000 full-time jobs to the region. So now, instead of walking in to buy something, you sit on your couch and something gets shipped out from the exact same spot. The mall didn't die, it just changed uniforms. All right, this one's wild. Dixie Square Mall was an enclosed shopping mall in Harvey, Illinois, a suburb south of Chicago. Opened in 1966, it featured Montgomery Ward, JCPenney, Woolworth, Walgreens, and Jewel as its anchor stores. The property was developed by Robert Meyer Corporation, Meyer C. Weiner, Robert E. Freiling, and T.C. McDonald. But check this out. A time capsule was sealed and placed on the property by Mel Torme. Yes, that Mel Torme. The Velvet Fog himself sealed a time capsule at a suburban shopping mall. The 1960s were a different animal. The mall had a 60-foot tall sign, so huge it could be seen from the Illinois Tollway and the Calumet Expressway. You couldn't miss this place if you tried. And at its peak, by 1968, the mall had 64 shops. Baskin-Robbins, Kinney Shoes, Radio Shack, the whole squad. But Harvey, Illinois was going through some rough times. The factories were closing, money was drying up, and crime started hitting the mall hard. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, crime was increasing in Harvey, and several significant criminal incidents occurred at or near the mall, including 3 murders in 1 year alone. People stopped coming, stores started leaving. Between 1976 and 1978, the mall put $1 million toward better security. It wasn't enough. The Illinois Retail Merchants Association stated that in 1977 alone, $130 million worth of merchandise from Chicago area shopping malls had been shoplifted or stolen by employees. They said Dixie Square had to close down because of these losses. There was no way they could make it up. The mall was in operation for just 12 years, closing permanently in 1978. Now, here's where Dixie Square becomes a legend for a completely different reason. In mid-1979, director John Landis rented the vacant mall for 8 weeks to film a scene in The Blues Brothers. Elwood and Jake Blues drive through storefronts, display cases, and walls, destroying much of the mall while being chased by Illinois State Police. So, if you're a Gen X kid who watched The Blues Brothers on cable for the 50th time, that trashed mall, real destruction. They didn't build a set. They just used what was already dead. After that, the city of Harvey couldn't afford to maintain it. In 1984, vandals broke in, damaging and looting the mall. Every accessible pane of glass was soon broken. Within a year, any piece of metal worth salvaging had been stolen. It stood vacant for over 30 years before finally being torn down in May 2012. 30 years. That building was abandoned longer than it was ever open. Now, if Randall Park was the king, Rolling Acres was the cool, younger sibling. Rolling Acres Mall in Akron, Ohio, opened in August of 1975. Built by Forest City Enterprises, it was the largest and newest of the 3 enclosed shopping malls in the Akron area. It was designed by architect Kiva J. Kext at a cost of $75 million. And the design was something else. The center of the structure was known as the Court of the 12 Trees. Real trees growing indoors under a greenhouse-style skylight. It had unique light structures, decorations, a fountain surrounded by trees and beautiful foliage, and even a bubble elevator. A bubble elevator. In a mall. In 1975. If you were 7 years old, that mall was basically Disneyland with a JCPenney. A newspaper would later remember, in the 1980s and early 90s, all of Akron shopped at the mega mall. Kids flicked pennies into the mall's orange-tiled fountain, spent their allowance on earrings at Claire's, picked out back-to-school loafers at Tom McCann, gorged on boardwalk fries. That's not a news article. That's somebody's childhood on paper. At its peak, the mall had over 150 stores. It hosted family festivals, performances by the Akron Youth Symphony Orchestra, and even a filming of an episode of the PBS Kids show, Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? Yeah, Carmen Sandiego came to Rolling Acres. Do the math, kid. That's a cultural landmark. During the 1980s, the mall was renovated from top to bottom. The owners found the earth tones boring and outdated and went for pastel colors. Very 80s. Very Miami Vice meets a food court. But then the 90s rolled in, and things started to crack. Starting in 1991, Rolling Acres stopped using off-duty police officers and switched to cheaper private security guards. That same year, a fight outside a showing of New Jack City triggered a crowd panic, made worse by a metal sign that clattered loudly nearby. People thought it was a gunshot. A 2002 news article described the mall as having faltered since the early 1990s due to perceptions of high crime and lack of renovations. In September 2002, North Carolina businessman Haywood Wichard purchased Rolling Acres for $2.75 million. And here's the thing about Wichard. He had a track record of buying struggling malls at low prices and making no attempt to fix them, to the point that many of their properties were ultimately demolished. So he didn't buy the mall to save it. He bought it to watch the clock run out. In October 2008, The last 8 tenants were told the mall was closing. This was because of the huge unpaid electricity bill. On October 31st, 2008, the mall's power was finally disconnected. They couldn't pay the light bill. That's how it ended. Not with a wrecking ball, with a power switch. In 2019, the remaining structures were demolished. The site became, you guessed it, an Amazon distribution facility. 2 malls, same ending. Both turned into Amazon warehouses. Somewhere, Jeff Bezos is sitting on a throne made of fountain pennies. Now, not every mall story ends in rubble and a warehouse logo. Some get lucky. The 1971 grand opening of Highland Mall represented the first enclosed shopping center in Central Texas. The mall became a source of civic pride, a modern gathering place for the community for decades. Highland Mall was developed by Austin Malls Incorporated, a subsidiary of Maryland's Rouse Company. It was built on an 81-acre plot. Los Angeles' Katzman and Associates designed the complex. In its original state, it housed 84 stores. It was originally anchored by JCPenney, Austin-based Scarborough's, and San Antonio-based Joske's. 3 anchors, all with real roots in Texas. One person who grew up going there wrote, "To a kid in the 80s, this mall was retail heaven. The skylights, the fountains, the massive amounts of tile, the indoor plants, the food court. That's what these places meant. It was never about the stores. It was about the feeling." By 1979, following a major expansion, the mall had 157 stores alongside anchors like JCPenney, Foley's, and Dillard's. But time caught up. Newer, bigger malls opened nearby. An Austin real estate expert explained that malls like Barton Creek Square and the Domain siphoned off Highland's customers. By 2009, it was named one of America's most endangered malls. Anchor JCPenney had left in 2006, and Dillard's sued the mall's owners, claiming they let the place become a ghost town. One of your anchor stores suing you, saying you let the mall die. That's not a business dispute. That's a breakup letter. But here's where Highland Mall's story goes a different direction. On April 30th, 2015, Highland Mall officially closed after 44 business years. But instead of becoming a parking lot or a warehouse, Austin Community College District transformed the former Highland Mall into a state-of-the-art learning and training complex. ACC Highland now serves as an anchor to a mixed-use community with parks, trails, apartments, offices, restaurants, and shops. And before the mall ever existed, that same land housed the St. John's Orphan Home, an important school for African-American children in the early 1900s. So it went from a school to a mall and back to a school. That land remembered what it was supposed to be. Now, you're looking at all these malls, and you might think, it's just the internet, right? Amazon showed up, everybody stopped going, the end. But the truth started way before that. The success of malls created intense competition, leading to oversaturation. In some regions, multiple malls operated within a few miles of each other, each dependent on the same pool of shoppers. Then, if a single anchor store closed, it weakened the entire system. If 2 anchor stores closed, the decline became almost impossible to reverse. Dead Mall documentarian Dan Bell explained it. Most of these malls shut down because of the roof. They can't afford a new roof. The local government says, listen, you've got to get a new roof or we'll keep giving you citations. You've got 750,000 square feet. That costs you 3, 4, 5 million. They don't have that money, so they close. It wasn't some big dramatic villain. It was a roof leak and a tax bill. That's how empires fall. When online shopping grew, it stabbed a victim that was already bleeding out. Here's what gets me. Sitting here on this screen, malls now have a completely different meaning than they did 30 years ago, when people, especially teenagers, went to meet friends, go on dates, and just hang out. Today, there is no social meaning to a mall. It's not the center of the community anymore. As one mall historian put it, you used to take your pictures to the mall and complain about things at the mall with friends. We've digitized the food court. You didn't just lose buildings, you lost the place where you figured out who you were. But here's the thing, those malls are gone. The memories you made there, those are load-bearing walls. Nobody's tearing those down. If you like this video, hit the like and subscribe button below, and check out this video next. You might just find it interesting. See you there.